have said it any better, Ruby. Thanks. I get a lot of questions about how you're going to do this and what it looks like, so I thought we'd take a deeper dive into how I'm going to do it. Let's get started. Warning, this is a long explanation of how all these components will work together. If you want to see the build, click to part 2, otherwise hang around for some funk. I get a lot of questions on how I'm going to do this and how everything's going to work together. So I thought I'd just show briefly here what the supercharger system looks like. The motor is right here, and these are the intake boots from the intercooler, and the motor actually leans back this way. And so the supercharger is fed from the mag side. There's a pulley that comes on over to here. It runs a jack shaft, and the supercharger is actually mounted right underneath this filter, and that is the intake for it. The air gets compressed, it comes out through there, and then it goes into the intake here, and then the exhaust goes out the back. So the entire system is contained up here. It includes a battery and everything we need to have a supercharger on it, and it's proven to be very, very durable. So where then is the turbo going to mount? Well, the answer is in the gas tank. The factory gas tank fits really snug in here. It's very tall, and they tried to push all of the mass towards this way. We're going to remove that and instead be replacing it with a gas tank that has an opening here that will allow the turbo to sit basically right underneath this handlebar. My new intake will either be where the existing gas tank hole is, or we're going to make a new one almost where that logo or emblem is. That discharge tube will then spit out right about in this area here, and then we will follow that to the inlet of the supercharger, and that's how we're going to compound boost. So once we have the new gas tank in place, that'll necessitate a whole new seat and gas tank combo, and I've got some good ideas for that. I have two options. There's a aluminum gas tank that came with the Impulse kit, which uses a Boss Apex style seat to go on top, and then I've also got a Skidoo trail tank for an XP, and I'm really excited to make that work. The seat integrates right onto the top of it, looks very OEM, and I like the design of that. Plus it's a trail tank, which is about 13.5 gallons. Assuming the sled will be thirsty, I want to have as much fuel on board as possible. Another question I get is how I'm going to control this through the stock ECU, and the answer is we're not. We're going to be using the Motec M400. I'll have lots more to come on that. It is a very involved setup, but it should offer great control, and in theory be able to remove all the turbocharger boost, since I can control that through the wastegate and just run on the supercharger, which I can't control because it's being spun by the crank. This is the wiring harness that comes with the Motec. It's a very slick system. It just plugs in to your factory wiring and basically just acts as an intercept harness, which is very convenient. This is going to be where you run your USB connector to basically program the unit. This is the knock sensor edition. If you're not familiar with Motec, it basically only comes with the basic kit, and then you add on these extra components. So I've optioned on the knock control sensor here. This will fasten to the starter bolt on the block to help me detect knock. Over here is my closed loop boost control solenoid, so I'll be able to control the boost on my TL wastegate from that. Back here is the wideband AFR. That'll be the key to the system running and perfectly, no matter what load condition or atmospheric condition I'm in. The Motec, I am planning to use closed loop fueling once I get the open loop tables dialed in, so that this just maintains perfect air fuel ratio. The sled should run crisp and clean. Down here we got our fuel pressure sensor. This will be great stuff to data log, and that'll show up on my log as well, my display. This does run your factory ignition coils, and all the other sensors that come on the Apex work with this. It's also programmed to run the factory dash. So I'm going to run the factory dash in addition to the Raspberry Pi based display, and someday I can maybe get rid of the factory dash. This even does do your hand warmer controls, which is really super convenient. It's the toggle, it doesn't go up and down, it goes up all the way to the top, you hit up again, and it starts over at the bottom, and it's just a circle. So it's a little different than factory, but the nice thing is it starts at full hot. With my cold hands all the time, I'm loving that feature. Another question I get is, how am I going to review this data while on the trail? How will I know if something is malfunctioning? And I'm going to be using this display to directly wire into the Motec CAN bus system, so it'll be live data. Each of the indicators here will light up and flash should there be a fault. You can see the IAT is lit up right now just as a test. It is flashing. It's hard for the camera to pick up, but everything else will flash. And there's also master warnings that will tell me when it detects knock and is retarding the timing and all that other stuff. So it's going to be a great display to visually see this while you're going down the trail or across the lake. It will show up. Another thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to run direct hardwire to the Motec, and I'm going to use a PDM or a what's called an amp link by this company, Row Electronics. It's basically like a circuit breaker for 12 volt systems. There's no fuse or anything. You can do up to 20 amps, and I'm going to power the Motec directly off the battery through that. I'm also going to power up my Raspberry Pi based display, and the cool thing about this thing is on your smartphone you can link into it and you can set delays. So I'm hoping to set the delay to turn on and turn off, so that if I'm doing quick key starts and shuts off, say loading a trailer, my display isn't turning on and off and possibly corrupting the SD card. Another question I get is, will this overpower the suspension? And the answer to that is not with the suspension that I will be using, which is an 80 bovine ZX2 that's now discontinued. It is a plastic or polyethylene based suspension. It's proven to be extremely robust and has handled anything I can throw at it, regardless if the sled has been turbocharged or supercharged, pushing 300 plus horsepower. It handles it with ease, and big bumps it does not bottom out, and should be zero issue in the rear, absorbing 400 to 500 horsepower. The front suspension, however, is a different story. This is going to be extremely limited with the Fox float shocks. I do really enjoy the Nextech reservoirs, but these are actually mountain shocks, which are an inch lower, and I'm actually going to go back and put on some OEM 2018 Apex YRSS shocks. Those shocks have a remote reservoir, and they can hydraulically control roll and body movement, and I think it's going to give me better control initially. I do have a phase 2 plan that will come after those, but I really want to try those shocks out and see if it was worth the effort to go to phase 2. Last question I get is if this is going to be on the stock tunnel. And the short answer is no. The long answer is yes. While I get the motor, turbo, supercharger, Motec all working together this year, I'm going to leave this on the stock tunnel. Next year I have a custom tunnel that I've designed in my CAD software that will be replacing this. It'll be much more robust, much stronger, a lot less flex. This poor tunnel is seen better days, but in typical Yamaha quality fashion, it's going to be good for 1 more year. Another question I get is how I'm going to cool the sled. When you're developing that much horsepower, your cooling needs go up exponentially. There is an existing stock OEM radiator right here, and that has a fan wired to it that the Motec can control. I can also do an auxiliary input, and right now my current plan is to put an extremely large U-cooler in the tunnel. However, I want to play with the idea of a small car radiator in the back. This is a 151-inch snowmobile. I've got plenty of room in the rear tunnel, and my future plans are to put a radiator back there that the Motec acts as the controller for when the fan turns on and off. But hopefully this year it'll play nice with the modified cooling fan on the OEM radiator setup and the larger cooler that I already have installed in this particular sled.